Do the trashy pulp novels of the world have anything to offer? Are bestsellers all they're cracked up to be? Here at Terrible Book Club, we explore whether you really can judge a book by its cover, or its ridiculous synopsis. You ever passed a book and thought, ugh, who's reading this? We probably are. Hello and welcome to episode 162 of the Terrible Book Club. I'm Chris, and this is Paris.
Hello.
I got that wrong the first time we recorded that.
Yeah, he thought he was me. I mean, I guess that's like flattering, right?
Anyway, this time we read Things in Jars by Jess Kidd.
I just saw the typo.
Things in Jarred is what the notes say, but it's Things in Jars with an S by Jess Kidd, published in 2020 by Astria Books, an imprint of Simon & Schuster. This was requested by our patron Donnie, who wrote to us saying, "My wife and I read, or rather tried to read, a book called Things in Jars by Jess Kidd with our neighborhood book club." Oh, that's nice. Not a single person in the book club was able to make it through the thing. We all gave up on it and spent the meeting talking about the other books we'd read while avoiding this one. The writing was competent enough, but something about it made it nigh impossible to maintain focus. We all agreed it kind of feels like an old forgotten draft that a seasoned writer might have pulled out of a drawer and handed to their publisher without revision. If you ever get around to it, I'd be happy to hear your thoughts. We've got them.
We've got him, Donnie. You're in luck. And, so Donnie mentioned reading this with his wife for their neighborhood book club, and I am pretty sure I found some evidence to back that up, because there was a lonely post on Reddit and somebody saying, "Hey, I had to read this for my neighborhood book club. What the fuck happened?" And there's like 8 other people going, "Yeah, I don't know." And
okay.
Just...
I feel very validated right now. Also, the sleuthing level. You're always willing to just like find some weird, obscure Reddit post or some bit of information.
Hey, man, I'm a child of the 90s internet.
Me too. I'm just not willing to look that hard.
Okay, I'm a child of the 90s internet with a little more drive. I don't know.
Fair, yes.
It's the red hair, you see. That is what it is.
Yes, indeed. All right. Well, why don't you tell the good folks here what we are doing here? What's the point of this?
All right. So if this is your first time listening to this show, what we do here at the Terrible Book Club is we read books that we assume will be bad based on their cover, title, summary, or some combination of the three. Sometimes, though, like today, we read books that our patrons, listeners, or friends have recommended. So we do the opposite of what most people do when they're in a bookstore or while they're browsing the internet. Usually, this experiment results in a disappointing and hilarious read, but once in a while, we do actually end up liking the book. In terms of content for today, we've got our usual barnyard language, and today's episode includes discussion or mention of child abduction, decapitation, jarred specimens, surgery, all that creepy Victorian experimentation stuff, and our non-graphic but ever-present ghoul sexual assault.
It's me, sexual assault. I'm still here.
Unfortunately, can't seem to shake you, sexual assault goblin. So yeah,
I'll be over here all the time.
So yeah, today's got a lot of things that people might find particularly icky. I think there's also a dead animal.
Yes. While we're on the topic of icky things, audio content warning. Paris and I are in the same room today. Who knows what reverby
who knows what
befoulments would be on here when I have to deal with two separate... Listen, if you've been listening to recent Terrible Book Club episodes, if you're an audio nerd like me, you might pick up some artifacting on my voice because my room is really reverby right now. I still got to put up a lot of cloth in here. Now we're both in the room. Who knows what kind of phase issues and fun cancellations will happen when I try to apply the de-reverbing thing to this. So, we'll see. Maybe this will be a naturally reverbed episode because I'll get sick of it.
So we're going to have the sexual assault goblin and then also the reverb gremlin and just all the little creatures that destroy our episodes.
I'm the reverb gremlin in a cave.
Yes. Anyway, thank you for being here with us today, and thank you, Donnie, for this recommendation. I thought this was a great recommendation because we actually had a lot to talk about. So yeah, appreciate
Unusual as well.
Really appreciate the recommendation, and thank you for being a patron, Donnie. All right, so before we get into the summary that we will provide of all the major plot points, we want to tell you like how this book was marketed. What was supposed to draw people into this book? So Chris, why don't you go ahead and read the back of the book summary for the folks at home?
All right. Pretty Divine, flame-haired, pipe-smoking detective extraordinaire, is confronted with the most baffling puzzle yet: the kidnapping of Christabel Berwick, secret daughter of Sir Edmund Athelstan Berwick. Athelstan Berwick. And a peculiar child whose reputed supernatural powers have captured the unwanted attention of collectors in this age of discovery. Winding her way through the sooty streets of Victorian London, Bridie won't rest until she finds the young girl, even if it means unearthing secrets about her past that she'd rather keep buried. Luckily, her search is aided by an enchanting cast of characters, including a 7-foot-tall housemaid, a melancholic tattoo-covered ghost, and an avuncular apothecary. But secrets abound in this foggy underworld where nothing is quite what it seems. Blending darkness and light, Things in Jars is a stunning, richly woven tapestry of fantasy, folklore, and history that explores what it means to be a human in inhumane times.
You know, some publicists wrote that and they were like, "Oh, this is so good."
That's you know what? That's pretty good. I will back this fake publicist that you've made up in your brain.
Yeah, it's a good lure to get people to pick this up. All right, why don't you go through our exhausting character list?
All right, so there was a lot of similar names in here. I was very confused as to what characters were who for a certain period of time here, so this is actually very helpful. Of course, we have Bridie Divine, forensic doctor, PI, private, I think so.
Yeah, she's like a forensic PI.
Yeah, I don't like...
Unclear.
Sure.
But through context.
Someone hired her to look stuff up, and she seems real doctory.
Yes.
All right. Cora Butter, her housemaid. Valentine Rose, inspector over at Scotland Yard or whatever.
And cartoonishly named love interest.
Yes. Ruby the ghost boxer, the other love interest. Sir Edmund Athelstan Berwick, baronet. I got that one right that time.
Yeah, there you go. Kristen
Berwick, a.k.a. Chevelle Kelly, his daughter, a.k.a. captive specimen.
I think you meant Christabel, not Krista.
Did I say Christabel? I thought I said Kristen.
You said Krista. You forgot that last... You know what? Okay. I would forgive you that last syllable there. It's okay. Just clarifying.
Christabel.
Yes.
Excuse me. Dr. John Eames, who was a second dad to Bridie at a certain point. She had a lot of dads, turns out.
She had 3 dads. We're going to talk about
We talked about dad number 2 first because it's like that pig thing where you let out, you number them 1, 3, and 4, and everyone's looking for 2 for a while, but there's no 2.
Where are we numbering pigs, Chris?
You've never heard of this? You've never heard this prank? Okay, you get 3 pigs, right?
Yes.
And you let them loose somewhere that you want to cause chaos, and you paint on them 1, 3, and 4.
Oh, so the point is to yes, okay, that makes sense. Sorry, I thought you were just talking about like a farmer, and I'm like, who's looking at these pigs? All right.
No, anyway.
Chaos pigs.
Yeah, dad number 2.
Returning to our regularly scheduled programming here.
So Dr. John Eames was a second dad to Bridie. Not her real none of her dads here are real dads.
Right, she was an orphan. She went through a series of like wardships, you know. So.
And Dr. John Eames was dad number 2. Dr. John Eames had a son, Gideon Eames, who is shitty, which we'll find out why later. You have Dr. Eames, the senior, his bastard child, Edgar/Kemp. You have Mrs. Bibby/Bad Dorcas, who is sort of the villainess here in some ways.
One of them.
You have Della Webb, who was a Paris when we were having a discussion about
Dorcas'
this.
Girlfriend.
Yeah, I didn't really pick that up, but I'm oblivious, so I'm going to go with what she said. You have Gan Murphy, first dad to orphaned Bridie. He is a body snatcher, resurrectionist is what I thought. There was some necromancy happening for most of this book, and I was like, "Ooh, is it good?" It's not unreasonable. There's supernatural elements here.
No, it's true.
Okay, then you have Prudhoe, right?
I said Prudhoe.
I said Prudhoe as well, not Prudhoe as it's spelled. Who is orphan dad number 3? He's a toxicologist/pharmacist.
of sorts. That was the best approximation.
You know, whatever counted for that in Victorian London when they didn't really have a licensing board for that kind of thing, it feels like. You have Dr. William Harbin, who is the baronet's doctor?
Yes, John Eames is... No, you're right. I'm sorry. Yes, he is Berwick's doctor.
Yes.
Sorry about that. That was my fault.
There was a notes correction there. And then we have Myrtle Harbin, who is Dr. Harbin's daughter, who is really more of a plot device than a character.
Yeah, and if you're at this point being like, I can't keep any of this straight, why do I care about this? Yeah, welcome. Join our club.
Speaking of, why don't we try to summarize what happened here for the good folks on Reddit over there?
Yeah, so this is the best I could do. I left out a lot of small details. I left out a lot of lesser characters, because if I didn't, this summary would have been exhaustive and painful as much of this book was.
Paris, you got to go back to that Reddit post and post a link to this episode.
I will.
Goes up.
I'll be like, folks,
I found out.
You can thank Donnie if he is in this neighborhood. What if all neighborhood book clubs were cursed with this book at the same time because it was like in Oprah's book club or some shit?
Maybe.
Anyway. All right, here we go. For everyone at home who didn't read this, this is the summary as we experienced it. This is our truth in Things in Jars by Jess Kidd. And we do this so that while we are praising the book, complaining about the book, you kind of get the basic plot points and you sort of know what happened. Bridie Devine is our resident Sherlady Holmes, and she's Irish, so she's gonna have red hair and be hot, right? As an orphan who was raised by first a corpse robber, then a doctor, and finally a toxicologist, Bridie has the perfect background to solve crimes as a private investigator. Sometimes she works with her friend Valentine Rose, who is employed by Scotland Yard, but largely she works alone. She lives with her maid, confidant, and bodyguard, the 7-foot-tall Cora Butter, with a baritone voice who takes absolutely zero shit from anyone. No one bothers her about being single and independent as a 30-something because Bridie pretends to be a widow despite never being married. In her last case, she failed to find a kidnapped boy fast enough, which ended in his murder. So, when wealthy Baronet Sir Berwick asks her to find his missing young daughter Christabel, she can't refuse the call. Of course, the case isn't what it initially seems. Christabel exhibits unusual traits and is rumored to be a Merrow, fabled evil mermaid of Irish lore. Bridie doesn't believe the child is actually supernatural, but does suspect something devious is going on. After a lot of disguises, investigating, legwork, and, people just spontaneously confessing to her, Bridie discovers that there are indeed nefarious deeds afoot. The baronet's doctor, Dr. Harbin, conspired to steal the child along with a hired con woman posing as a maid, Mrs. Bibby Dorcas, so they could sell her to a carnival or researcher for lots of money. It's honestly a pretty dumb fucking plan, especially since the child is actually a Merrow and is so dangerous that she is handled with chainmail and is kept in a straitjacket most of the time. Also, rare creatures and unique specimen were extremely popular at the time, so I'm not sure how Harbin and Dorcas thought they would get away with it and also make enough money for this whole charade to be worth it. Motivations for these villains are really questionable. Anyway, the bad guy sent a dude to rob Bridie, but he decides he also wants to rape her. They have a brief brawl, and it's actually unclear what the extent of the assault was. Harbin gets double-crossed by his buyer for the Merrow child, who decapitates him. Coincidentally, this buyer was actually Bridie's childhood nemesis, Gideon Eames, who murdered her dog and a random sick elderly woman, Della Webb, because he has a fascination with vivisection and is just an all-out vile human being. Dr. Harbin's daughter, Myrtle, provides Bridie with essential clues, and Dorcas gives a deathbed confession for villain reasons, I guess. Finally, Bridie gets to the end boss, Gideon, once more, and confronts him and his henchman, Edgar Kemp, and rescues the Merrow, whose actual name is Chevelle, and Myrtle, the daughter of Dr. Harbin, from their clutches. No one except the bad guys die. The Merrow gets to go free in a river instead of being in a circus or experimented upon, and Bridie solves the case. Oh yeah, and she had a ghost boyfriend for the duration of the case, but there's no reason to talk about it because it had no bearing on anything at all. The end. Things in Jars!
Fantastic! Things in Jars.
All right, Chris. Would you like to begin?
There was quite a few things that were enjoyable and nice. So, while this was edited for spelling and syntax, it's got a lot of making sure things spelled good. Sentence work right.
Correct. It wasn't it wasn't difficult to read a sentence and like sentence line by line, as you typically say. It was sound.
Yes. Definitely not edited for content.
Yeah, we'll talk about that later.
Sure. We're still in the good parts. So yeah, generally put together competently in terms of making words that make sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Good vocabulary. We get flourishing descriptions we'll talk about a little bit later. So yeah, all that was good. Like Donnie said, competent writing.
Okay. Then we had some shifting perspective, different chapters focusing on different people. Sometimes we went back in time with Bridie. We got a lot of perspective of Christabel.
Yeah.
And Mrs. Bibby, kind of same time sort of thing. It wasn't I ever, so it was like, omniscient third person kind of narrator thing. And Christabel and Mrs. Bibby had their perspective. Bridie had her perspective. Did we get another one? Mostly Bridie in the past.
Yeah, Bridie in the present, and then Mrs. Bibby, Dorcas.
Yes.
Mrs. Dorcas Bibby is how I'm going to refer to her.
Yes.
She, there's a neat thing she does where you not only get her perspective in the present, but also in the past, because she is telling a kind of fairy-taled up version of her own life to Christabel as she's like kind of taking care of her / kidnapping her, which is awkward, but obviously they need to keep the kid alive and God do their best. So even though the child is dangerous and can't really be let out, Mrs. Dorcas Bibby at least tries to entertain her with stories, and the child does communicate through way of taps and stuff that she likes the stories. So I actually thought that device of Dorcas relaying her own life as a fairy tale to the child was a good convention. I enjoyed that. I thought it was layered enough that you did have to think about it a little bit. It wasn't too obviously served to you. If you've listened to the show before, you know that I can't stand books that just kind of hand things to you on a silver platter. This book did not do that, which I thought in some respects was good. In some respects, maybe not. But I did like this particular device. And if you pay attention to the fairy tales that Dorcas tells, you can then put together some things that are not figured out by Bridie until the very end. So, yeah, that was good.
Definitely slipped past me quite a bit, because I honestly started skimming the fairy tale things, because I was like, okay, clearly it's her talking about herself in the past, and maybe it's not all that true, so it isn't really that important. So I caught some things, but I think some things went over my head, like the Della Webb thing.
Yeah, that's okay. Another really good thing about this book is that this author, man, does she know how to set a scene, see you in that scene, and make you forget it is a scene that was set. The world obviously was built for her, as this is a historical fiction based in, 1860s London and I guess a little bit 1840s London. But she takes that history and revives the pieces into a vivid whole. There's a lot of attention to casual detail, which in some respects helps build the world up around a reader. I think later we're going to talk about how sometimes she gets a little lost in this, but I think for the most part, this is a mark in the good tally for this book. I'm going to go ahead and read a couple of selections just so you can get the flavor. I think, or maybe Chris and I will both read them to get the flavor, just so you can understand what we're talking about here with the scene setting.
Here's a bit early on in the book, around page 4. But the servants slumber on. The housekeeper, tidy-bedded, neat of nightcap and frill like a spoon put away for best, inspects the linen cupboards of her dreams. Smiling at immaculate piles, heaven fresh, as clean as clouds, the butler, proper even in his night-shirted sleep, patrols an endless cellar. The bottles giggle in dark corners. They ease out their corks and call to him in honeyed voices. They sing songs of laden vines and sunny hillsides and duty forgotten, liquid bewitchment. He grips his lantern and will not stop. The housemaids, in their attic nests, are dreaming of omnibuses and pantomimes. The cook snores fruity, unpeeled and well soaked under warm sheets, as solid and brandy-scented as plum pudding. She dreams of matchless souffles. She humps them down as she sails in a saucepan over a gravy sea. All are senseless in their tucked-in, heavy breathing before dawn quiet. Saucepan over a gravy sea is some real
pretty good.
ace stuff.
Really great. I found the descriptions right at the beginning were rather enchanting. It really made me want to keep reading. And as we went on, even though, as we'll talk about later, some of it got a little exhausting, I still thought that overall, I felt like I knew where I was. I could really feel the settings with all my senses, right? And in this next section, I think that really exemplifies that. I can do the next one, Chris. So, in this section, the author is describing London through Bridie's senses. But for now, the slums are as they have always been, as warm and lively as a blanket full of lice. Bridie could find her way with her eyes shut and her nostrils open. Try it now. Close your eyes. Eyes that would be confused anyway by the labyrinthine alleys, twisting passages, knocked up and tumbling down houses. Breathe in, but not too deeply. Follow the fulsome fumes from the tanners and the reek from the brewery, butterscotch rotten, drifting across 7 dials. Keep on past the mothballs of the cheap tailors and turn left at the singed silk of the maddened hatter. Just beyond, you'll detect the unwashed crotch of the overworked prostitute and the Christian sweat of the charwoman. On every inhale, a shifting scale of onions and scalded milk, chrysanthemums and spiced apple, broiled meat and wet straw, and the sudden stench of the Thames as the wind changes direction and blows up the knotted back streets. Above all, you may notice the rich and sickening chorus of shit. The smell of shit is the primary olfactory emission from the multifarious inhabitants in Bridie Devine's part of town. Everyone contributes. The Russians, Polish, Germans, Scots, and especially the Irish. Everyone is at it, from Mrs. Neary's newborn crapping in rags to Father Dukin squatting genteelly over his chamber pot. Their output is flung into cesspits, cellars, and yards where it contributes to London's perilous reek.
That's a stinky passage.
I mean, definitely makes me feel pretty good about, like, sewage systems and stuff.
A chorus of shit is also a really great line there.
Yeah, so very descriptive. And Chris is going to lead us in our last example.
The cook told her that while Mrs. Eames worshipped her son, she had been indifferent to her daughter. At best, she had viewed poor Lydia as a dress-up doll. At worst, an inconvenience, like February or indigestion.
I just thought that was a really great description.
I do find February a little inconvenient, actually. It's just short enough to kind of fuck up your schedule. Like end of month stuff and like when bills roll in.
Oh, yeah, I guess that's true. In general, I like February though because we get a lot of snow. I love snow.
Not this time.
Yeah, not this time. You know, with the planet evaporating
yes.
and dying, convulsing. Anyway,
put that away in your brain.
Yeah, just ignore that. Anyhow, I just wanted to read some examples for the general good descriptions in this book, rich and full of the 5 senses. You know, you're really feeling what's going on here. The next thing I really enjoyed about this is the myth that was at the heart of this story. I think it was a good one, and it was well told within the narrative. I personally enjoy the marrow, and it doesn't feel overused in media yet, right? Like, we're not reading about a vampire, we're not reading about a regular mermaid, we're not reading about a zombie. The marrow is a great flavor of mermaids. Some would say it is actually the real mermaid. That is generally how they're considered.
Real mermaids of Scotland country. Or Londonderry. I don't.
Only real mermaids here.
No, I'm talking like Real Housewives, but it's just a bunch of like women with huge pikey teeth and.
Yeah, the real marrow of Dublin or whatever. Anyhow, yeah, I thought it was a nice departure from what we normally see when we read this sort of like historical fiction with a supernatural flavor. This is a very popular genre. We have faced it many times.
Usually the monster is sexy.
Usually the monster is sexy.
Which, like...
And usually someone's fucking it or wants to fuck it.
Yeah.
Thankfully, that does not happen at all. Does not appear. I think we also usually see the monster as not as dangerous as people think it is, but in here it's like very clearly a problem. The child, like, Christabel Chevelle is fucking dangerous. Like, she's got to be handled with chainmail gloves and has to be kept in a straitjacket because she will eat your cat and she will bite you to death.
She will also drown you. She will conjure water and drown you.
Yeah, I don't really know how the chainmail and straitjacket helps with that, particularly.
Everyone knows water can't get through links and chain.
Yeah. that was an odd bit, but in any case, a lot going on there. But my point is that I thought that this illustration of this particular mythical creature and the choice of creature was a great one. I really enjoyed that. I was immediately interested. I wanted to read more. It was just done. That part was really done masterfully, I would say. I also thought, so the reason I feel the inclusion of this particular mythical character and like the whole Marrow thing was masterful was because also the time and place for this particular mystery around a mythical creature was chef's kiss, because if you know anything about that period in time and place, Victorian England to, 1860s, 1900, etc., that general period, very into discoveries and like special specimen and rare creatures. We've all heard about, I'm sure, like the Fiji mermaid, which is fake, and I don't know, I'm trying to think of what else, like
Sir Arthur Conan Doyle even went out there looking for fairies, right? Like,
yeah, right. Fairies. People were really interested in science kind of overtaking myth and superstition and either proving those things to be true and some kind of new path for, at least in the Marrow's case, like a new type of human or a human hybrid, or using science to outright disprove stuff. So people were just like all about this. And at the same time, you had carnivals and circuses in addition to the scientific community. I mean, sometimes they're kind of one and the same.
Hello, I'm Dr. Clown.
Yeah.
Researcher.
I mean, yeah, like featuring things. I mean, there's, I don't want to spend too much time on this. I feel bad glossing over it, but we don't really have the time to do a deep dive. But of course, there is quite a sordid history here. You have a lot of, this story illustrates like kidnapping and selling of people and quote unquote creatures. But this is unfortunately a period of time where a lot of people with unique and uncommon characteristics were kind of sold into basically slavery and treated like shit and experimented upon in some cases. Really bad stuff. So I just really feel like this particular mystery was perfect for this setting. Like the author did her work there with the history, found the right period of time, found the right kind of mystery, the right creature. I just really want to applaud this in the book because this is the thing that kept me. These are the things that kept me interested, I should say. And yeah, it was great. The other aspect of this that I thought was a really, kind of part of the mastery here was the myth of the Marrow and Bridie kind of being a parallel, right? Because Bridie is an Irish orphan. She has been passed around through different families as a ward. She kind of her life sort of gets dictated to her by the men who are allowed to make decisions about her life. Very few things she does are fully her choice until she's much older. And similarly, the Marrow, the child in the story and both the myth at large, Marrows are a tale told of men wanting to control women at its heart, which is another reason why that myth kind of speaks to me. I don't know. I just enjoy it. It's been relevant to my life, I guess, or many people's lives. You have this beautiful creature who is seen as sort of dangerous and chaotic and does things that, men just don't understand. And in order to control them, they have to like take something from them and tame them, and they can never be allowed to have their own free will, or they'll kill everyone and just do whatever the fuck they want. I don't get it.
Why does she keep trying to run away from me? I just put her in a box at all times.
Yeah, right. And so it's this wonderful parallel, and I don't think it's too heavy-handed. The only part of it that was like maybe a little too much was that, right, Bridie's also Irish. The Marrow is something from Irish folklore, so it's like a little much. But in general, I thought the parallel was nice. I didn't think it was overdone. So yeah, this part, like I said, I could talk about how much of a win this whole part to this book was. Really enjoyed it. Sorry, Chris. Thanks for giving me the airtime to wax poetic about the Marrow.
Dude, what happened to you? Well, my fucking Marrow got out and bit my arm off. Why'd it do that? I don't know. I fed it twice a day. That's all you need to do, right?
Yeah, that's what you do with wives, right? Keep it in a box, feed them twice a day.
I liked Cora. It's very hard to do the sort of sarcastic, whippish character in the background, always like with a cutting remark. It's very easy to be cringe about that.
Oh, absolutely. And it's also very easy to be cringe about having a character in a work who is kind of gender nonconforming, a woman, but doesn't have, sort of your characteristically cishet characteristics. Cora is a woman who is 7 feet tall. She's kind of hulking. She has facial hair. She's a baritone voice, but she's a woman, damn it. And, and that's totally accepted in the story. No one questions it. Like, it's a really great presentation.
She's visually remarkable because of her height, for sure.
Correct.
Like, people are like, that's a tall person. But beyond that, that's about it. I mean, again, because it's very easy to do this character wrong.
Yes.
And so it's commendable to the author that her witticisms or sarcastic snide remarks are just enough there to make her seem a little bit enjoyable. I feel like Cora's voice is always being like the one in the background, like Bridie will say something and you'll hear kind of someone go, like, right? Like that's the voice that she would probably be doing, like under her breath, some kind of remark.
But not in like a tut-tutty.
No.
It's like you said, it really strikes the correct tone, and the treatment of Cora is not an oddity to be like, the book doesn't have this like garish lingering on Cora like a character like this would have in a lot of other mainstream books by big publishers. So yeah, I gotta say it. Good job. I mean, we are two like cishet people, but for us, we thought this was a good inclusion. I just wanted to call it out.
I enjoyed every scene Cora was in. Yeah,
agreed. And she also, she has a respectable job. She's just, a maid. She's maid and, best friend of Bridie. She's not, a lot of the time, anyone who's non-gender conforming is automatically slotted into, sex work or being, a spectacle. And that's not the case here. She's just a woman leading her life. Leading her life is what I was trying to say. A woman leading her life. Sorry about that. She's also gay and not closeted, which was interesting. I mean, she's not out there making a spectacle of herself, but she does go on a date with a woman in this story.
There's a snake lady.
Yeah, there's a snake lady.
She's like, I like that snake. What's up with that snake? And they just hang out on the side in the story. It's not even for a book that does go a little bit too much into detail about things. Cora actually is like, I'll thank you not to ask me about it, actually.
Yeah, I really thought that Cora's inclusion was great. She was there for the right amount of time at the right points. The depiction of her was not tone deaf for once, and I just really liked it. I mean, it was a bummer that she and the girl she was dating didn't end up, together happily ever after, but neither of them fucking died. The gay ladies didn't get fucking murdered. They weren't tokenized. Thank you.
They were just there as a little side
characters.
It's
regular
mostly
characters.
A little bit of humor because Cora was like, I like that snake lady at the circus. I'm just not going to be here for this one scene because I'm on a date with my snake lady.
Yeah, and okay, all right. And you might be wondering, why the fuck is this such a marvel? Why do you care? And I would like to please see Please see Exhibit A, any mass media featuring gay or gender nonconforming women. Guess what? They almost always get tortured or die. Something horrible happens. So the fact that didn't happen in this book is unfortunately notable. And I would just like to say thank you to the author. Thank you.
Hooray. You did it. Now here's the part where we talk about the stuff we didn't like. So really.
Yes, sorry.
Okay, just going to pat you on the back and now a slap in the face.
I know. I really wish that we didn't have to structure this as it's not quite a shit sandwich, right? Because we don't do good, bad, good, but it's like a shit piece of toast. It's like
Harris, I've been saying for a long time that we don't have to structure it good and bad. We could just have a freeform discussion.
Yeah, but then it's unclear, I think, to people listening. So anyhow, thus concludes all of the major things we enjoyed about the book. We are now going to move into the things we didn't like so much, things that were not so great.
Top of the list, right? Screaming huge letters, as large as possible. Why Ruby the ghost boxer with a top hat and underwear only on and covered in tattoo? He's pantsless and shirtless the whole time with just a top hat and a mustache and a bunch of tattoos that move around his body, and he's a ghost. And Bridie thinks he's hot, and he thinks she's hot, but they can't do anything about it. Also, it has zero bearing on the story whatsoever, except that he can go into things and scout a little, or like go behind someone's shoulder to read something out loud to Bridie.
But none of that has any bearing on the story. Like you said, there's absolutely...
He doesn't find out a key piece of information.
Nope. And I struggled. I was like, what the fuck was the point of this? Did I fucking miss something? Like, I was in the neighborhood book club going like, why was this here? And it really... and again, if you've listened to the show before, you know that Chris and I hate romance subplots for the most part because they are almost always done poorly. This is one of those. This was really just like, hey, we gotta pad this out, even though you really didn't, because it's 386 fucking pages. You didn't have to pad it out, man.
Because of the good writing, I thought some of the like romantic subtext was actually like well done for like if I was reading a romancy thing. But it's still, there was no, this is the most superfluous romance subplot I have ever seen. Ruby adds nothing.
I don't get it.
He early on, he goes, oh, if you knew who I was from your past, because he knew Bridie from somewhere previously. And she's like, I don't remember you. And he goes, well, if you knew who I was, you wouldn't want to talk to him anymore. Way into the book, Ruby
at the very end.
Ruby was some kid that when Gan Murphy, dad number one to Bridie, was taking her across the ocean, they were on a boat that was a little bit, sloshed about quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
The ocean was vibrating it real good or whatever, because as we know from Karnacki, it got a little scary, and like perhaps they didn't capsize, but they like kind of almost did.
Yeah. Anyway, she makes a friend on the boat, this other kid, and they fall into the water together, and he saves her. And guess what? That's Ruby, the boxer.
Why would she not want to know him?
Why?
Because I'm fairly sure he saved her life.
He did. And I think they were also like 6 years old. They were like really little.
So why would finding out, hey, you're that kid that saved my life when we got knocked overboard on a boat one time. Fuck off. I don't want to see your face ever again.
Yeah, I think the assumption he was making was that he was a stowaway on the boat and was some kind of maligned class of people. So therefore, but I was like,
so was she? She
Irish.
Was an orphan
yeah,
too.
She's an Irish orphan, like also a maligned group at the time in that place. So like, that made no sense to me. Why did we need to have this like, Bridie has weird amnesia about this thing. She has to remember it. She has to remember it to unlock this special part of her memory in person. And like, no, didn't do shit.
No.
So the central mystery surrounding like who Ruby is and why he's there doesn't fucking matter, even once it's determined. He's only present during this case. He first appears to her in a churchyard that she goes to because she's investigating the entombed bodies of a woman and a marrow infant. This is right at the beginning of the book. And he is buried in that churchyard and appears to her. And she's like, well, I don't believe in ghosts. I don't know, this is weird, but whatever, which I thought was funny. But then as it goes on, he keeps appearing to her and he's like living in her house. Well, he's like in her house with her and stuff.
Deading in her house.
Yeah, it's just deading up in the house. And they start developing, like a crush on each other. And I'm like, this is so dumb. And then she buys Afterlife Love by Niles McClure. She buys the Victorian equivalent of Afterlife Love by Niles McClure. She buys a book that's like Spectral Love, how to be with your dead lover. And I'm like, son of a bitch, are we going to have to read this lady fucking a ghost? And I was so pissed. Luckily, that never happens. I will credit the author.
They're
we never
for
get
each other. They're always like,
they
if only we could touch. If only we could touch. But there's other ways to do sexy stuff. You can like look at each other while you do.
Can you not jerk off if you're a ghost?
I don't. He says that he can't feel things.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
So
maybe not.
Just be creative, man. You can still get some sexual delight out of it.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Come on, you don't need to go to the astral plane.
Yeah. So we have these two uncreative people who are they're not in love because this case seems to happen over a short period. I guess I don't actually know.
It's a few months, I believe.
A couple months, right? Yeah,
because there are like back and forth from London and
there are month headings on the chapters, but it's a few months, right? In any case, at the very end of the book, once she solves the case, or right before she solves the case or whatever, she solves the case, and as part of solving the case, she plunges into a river, and being plunged into the river recalls the memory of Ruby, and then she goes home, and after a few days, he's like fading. And she's like, oh no, it's because I remembered you. And he's like, yeah, it had to be this way. And then hang on a second. Okay, I'm going to read a passage to you that when I finished it, I said, I will burn Britain to the fucking ground because it was so stupid. I'm going to read it to you.
Okay.
I'm going to read it to you. Ruby stays by her side. They hardly talk, but this is not contentment, and Ruby knows it. As he knows, it can't last. He yearns to lie down and close his eyes. He wonders if a dead man can be exhausted. He wonders if Bridie has noticed. She has, of course. She keeps the curtains drawn and the gaslights dim, for he is fading daily. Today she can barely see him as he stands by the window, peering out at the visitor below. The inspector, says Ruby, has roses. Bridie draws in her pipe. Good for him. Ruby listens. There's a sound of Cora hobbling down the stairs to answer the door. Will you be indisposed again? I will. He's a good man, Bridget. Bridie glances up at him. He holds his hat in his hand with the air of a man taking his leave. And all at once, Bridie's heart turns in her. What are you even saying? Bridie notices the tattoos on his body. They are no longer moving. The anchor has taken itself up, its rope coiled neatly. The skull's teeth meet in a rictus grin, and the mermaid gazes fixedly far into the horizon, shielding her eyes with her inked hand. The heart on Ruby's chest is complete now, still and whole. Bridie reads her name on it, etched in blue, where it has always been. Bridget! I think you should live a bit, Bridie. And she is crying, sobbing, with the heart floored in her, but not looking away. Not now, not ever. He holds her with his eyes for the longest time. For this is their parting. As sudden and slow, surprising and foreseen as any parting. Between together and apart, an eye blink and all of eternity. What do I have to do? She asks. But he has already gone. I'm gonna burn Bryn to the fucking ground. The tattoo shining on his spectral chest with her name. So he got a tattoo of a child he met when he was 6 who he saved from drowning, and that was the name he got. What the fuck?
We were both unclear as to whether he had Bridget written on the tattoo for a while or whether it was etched across his heart in that moment.
Yeah.
Which I think is a nice microcosm of how confusing this book can be.
Yeah, that's actually true.
Where some details that should be clear are not clear.
Yeah, and okay, again, I'm sorry I'm belaboring this, but like Ruby's inclusion really does not make sense. If it had been stripped from this book, it would have been so much more enjoyable because like a lot of the time, he sort of functions as, you know, the Watson and the Watson to Holmes ratio that these books seem to need. But she seems perfectly content, like, mulling things over with Cora at home. Or talking to Valentine Rose, the detective that she has, like, this weird, like, kind of friendship with, and he kind of likes her, but whatever. She also mulls things over to herself all the time. There's no need. She's also solved plenty of other cases without a ghost sidekick.
He doesn't even do the ghost thing of, I went into the house to get the information so that I can tell you.
Right.
Which, even
I mean, that sucks and is cheap. But
yes, I agree. I would not have liked that either. But to be clear, if you're gonna put the ghost in there, I feel like he's got to do a little something to help in the investigation.
Yeah.
He looked over a shoulder one time and he warns Bridie when people have guns.
That's about it. Which I also feel like, as a forensic private investigator who's been in a lot of dangerous situations, and also a child who survived, you know, a lot, being a body snatcher's apprentice, a surgeon's apprentice, dealing with, you know, Gideon murdering her dog as a child, and like all this shit. She doesn't need it. Honestly, like, she's already written as like a strong, independent woman, and she is that.
I don't need no ghosts.
I don't need no ghosts. Get out of here. I'm a strong, independent, mortal, breathing woman. I don't need no ghosts. Get out of here with your ghosts.
I agree.
Seriously, get the fuck out of here with your ghost lovers. I don't want it. There's no reason for it to be in here. Cut it. If you're thinking about including a ghost lover, do not do it. I will find you. I'm kidding. Anyway, that
Not
sucked.
want to do that level of research.
It sucked. I also, sorry, I spent a lot of time on the ghost lover, but I would also just like to read how, like, bizarre we only really get one detailed glimpse into their attraction to each other, and somehow they're both fantasizing about the same thing independently, which is already weird. Because there's no, like, setup. There's no reason they should both be daydreaming about the same exact scenario with each other. But I suppose we're supposed to take that as though, oh, they're fated lovers. Therefore, they're having the same dream. And this little daydream seems to be about, like, wouldn't it be great if we were engaged in domestic violence together? And I was like, what the fuck? I'm going to read this to you all because I found it confusing.
It's going to be real fun figuring out the right music for this. Whatever's coming up here, I searched for it for 10 minutes, I promise you guys.
Bridie steals a look at Ruby. He catches her and smiles back, his brown eyes full and kind and hot on hers. She feels the sudden keen pain of something like sadness. If he wasn't dead and she was inclined, she is inclined, she could just imagine a life beginning and ending with him. Ruby, drunk home, with his boots on in bed. Oh, the rose and the making up. Having a rabble of dark-eyed children to him, growing old in the familiarity of his touch, his thoughts, his breath, his fingertips smoothing a loose hair, his lips bent to her neck. And she's awash with sorrow, because she can't have a dead man. The sudden watery luster to her eyes she blames on the freshening air. Ruby steals a look at Bridie. She catches him and smiles back, her eyes full of devilment, and who knows what thoughts, and oh, he could kiss her for that. She walks fast, her widow's cap and black bonnet slipping back, her cape discarded and bundled under the perambulator, so that Ruby sees the contours of her fine, strong body and motion, the open, easy grace of her, for all the world like a proud mother. Ah, no, another smile glimpsed and caught, green eyes shining, and does she feel herself liquid, and would she pour herself into his arms and abandon reason and cleave to him? A life ending and beginning with her roaring, him drunk at home, in the bed with his boots on, brawling and loving, serenading. Their raucous children, green-eyed, please God. A babe on the knee before the hearth, and his London Illustrated self pinned on the wall, Bridie. Growing old together, and the familiarity of her touch, her voice, his fingertips threading foxy autumn hair. Ruby wipes his eyes briskly on the back of his hand, a fault of the freshening air, and notes a rough bit of road coming up. Why are they both imagining them yelling at each other and being drunk with boots on in bed? What is that about?
That's the husband and wife stuff.
Yeah, but that's not good husband and wife stuff. What the fuck?
I don't know. Maybe because they're particularly weird in the same way for each other, which is, again, as you said, the point, like with the boots in the bed line is supposed to make you think,
yeah.
Oh, look, they both have the same silly image in their head.
Also, I'm going to pick a nit right now. Did you notice that at the end of that I said, Ruby wipes his eyes briskly on the back of his hand, a fault of the freshening air. He has stated twice previously that he's a ghost and he can't feel anything, so how would him crying be attributed to the air?
That's his mental excuse, so that's what he would tell Bridget?
I guess. I hate this. I hate all of this so much.
He's crying about not getting to yell at his wife?
He's like, oh man, I can't be drunk with my boots on in bed screaming at you while you're dealing with our screaming children. God damn it, I really missed out. Dying in a barroom brawl. And she's like, yeah, I really would have loved for you to be drunk and screaming at me. Oh, God.
Let's cry about it together.
What the fuck? Get better fantasies.
Whatever that I'm not going to kink shame, I suppose, your boots in bed fetish.
Hashtag boots in bed. We're gonna call that on Twitter anyway. Yeah, get rid of your ghost lovers. All right, sorry, I'm gonna stop talking about this now. I just really hated it so
that
much.
Was point one, bro. Okay, so let's move on here.
All right, the next thing that we really had trouble with was as rich as these descriptions are, and as much of a boon as it was to the work. Man, the author sometimes just feels like she's getting a little lost. Just getting on these weird tangents where she's like, and this man had 7 moles on his face, and they were each the size of a state in the United States across the pond, where they say they like it really just she just starts spinning a yarn. And you're like, you're running out of yarn. She's like, nah, it's fine. And
I got more of the
stop.
yarn, and she pulls out a second ball of yarn that is connected to the first ball of yarn.
And you're like, fuck.
Oh shit! I was gonna sit here.
It really, yeah. There's just so many times where the author should have put the brakes on a description, or should have maybe not spent really any time in some situations describing people because they don't matter. And
I don't need a
nothing.
full paragraph about Jem, the newspaper boy who delivers a message once across the thing, like a full paragraph, like trying to almost get into the deep lore, like you picked up his hat in Elden Ring. It's like Jem, the newsboy from the lands beyond, was once the ritual practitioner of newspaperology, like
the
Academy of Boingo Gaglarga, like
when you don Jem's hat, you gain +2 to sweeping, +3 if it's a chimney. Yeah, it's a little much. And okay,
see, if you pick up the other hat later in the game, you find out that Jem, the newspaper boy, was actually apprenticed to Borgo, the wizard, who would cast newspaper magic.
Jesus fucking Christ.
I realized that all my made-up names were just the letter B and then O and then some other consonants, but I'm fine with that.
It's all right.
Anyway, I've got here a passage that will illustrate the point.
Have you a passage, Master Chris? Please.
And this is its own section in the book. Actually, they have, where you put like a little hyphen in the middle of the page to like break off parts of a chapter. This is its own completely separated thing here. A man calls in at the old ship chandlery shop. A stranger, large but agile, scarred face and hands, close-cropped hair, and a grown-out beard in the Crimean fashion. He has a quiet, hostile way about him. Bill knows enough about the world to know that not only is this fella used to bad business, he excels in it. Bill says nothing, but keeps a weather eye open below the brim of his sou'wester. His wife leads the stranger through the cobwebbed clutter and into the back room and closes the door behind them. Tightening the rope on his trousers and pulling down his hat against probable squalls, Bill loiters near the door. He hears words, package, Polgate, delivery, then footsteps heading toward the door. Bill scuttles back behind the counter, his old thumper yammering its complaint against the hull of his rib racks. As the stranger leaves, he tips his hat and sends Bill a look of such dedicated malice that the ancient mariner would run away to sea in a bucket if he had one sound enough to paddle.
Yeah, and guess what? The character doesn't fucking matter. No one cares. It doesn't matter. So the thing, all right, and I want to make sure I'm being clear here, because if you've listened to this show before, or even if you listened to our initial discussion of what we thought was good, you might be confused. You might be saying, well, Chris and Paris, you always like rich detail. Yes, but a good author knows where the rich detail belongs, where it is important. Sometimes those little details matter, and that's great. However, this really could have been cut down for content, Ghost Lover and some other things, and also just in the number of descriptions and about what, right? Sometimes it's nice to get a little extra for accessory characters that don't matter, but not every single time. There's already too large of a cast of essential characters, and then there's all these little fucking dust mites of characters floating around everywhere, and now you get allergies.
Please these characters up. Right? Yeah, they're everywhere. When's the last time you cleaned this book up?
Yeah, now I have asthma. Thanks. It was too much.
Book moms in here, just like coming in here.
No, but I mean, you
gotta just know left this character on the ground for like you described his whole thing.
You just need to know where the details are necessary and helpful. Again, it's okay to include some, and actually even good if you include some that are a little unnecessary, but this is nearly 400 pages and it did not need to be, is the point.
Bill's sou'wester hat you can find in the depths of London's dungeons. And if you pick that up, it tells you that all hats in London actually give you a bonus to a certain attribute depending on its style and what era it came from. Also...
Well, you know what? If you find Ruby the Boxer's boots, you can actually fuck Brady Divine.
Just the tip of a corporeal penis.
Yep. Just gives you just enough. You get you are blessed with a +2 to penis for 3 hours and makes your organ corporeal. All right, sorry. You know what? I promised I wasn't going to talk about Ghost Lover anymore, and I broke that promise. I apologize, everyone. Anyhow, I hope you understand what we're saying. I just don't think in this work that the excessive detail served it at all. The author's already great at giving rich descriptions. You don't need to give me a rich description of every fucking spoon and doily and cap and person's lump on their head. Like, there were only some characters who the description really mattered for, like Edgar Kemp. We needed to know that he had, like, a lumpy head because that's how you can distinguish, that's how you knew that baby Edgar was actually adult Kemp because they shared some characteristics. That was great. That made sense, but I didn't need to know what the Marrow's mom, Ellen Kelly, looked like. I didn't need to know what that fucking guy in the shop looked like and all the other tens of guys in shops. I didn't need to know all this background lore on a priest who gives Bridie some information, and he's got, like, a menagerie of animals, and we talk about the chapel full of animals for, like, 10 pages, and I just yeah, it's cool. I liked it, but at that point in the book, I was like, we are at 200 pages, and I would like to be done now.
Me too. I had to really piecemeal this one out quite a bit.
All right.
Okay.
Moving on.
Why did anyone do anything?
Well, I feel like
why did anyone do anything?
I feel like we're going to be in this parking lot for a while if we go there next. So do we want to just hit some short ones first and then drive to the,
you know what?
To the motivation parking lot?
We'll come back to this one because it's a pretty big one.
Yeah. All right.
Keep that in mind that I'm questioning why anyone do things.
Yeah. Let's move through our shorter notes first. Next thing I think is a pretty quick note is, hey, female presenting characters don't need to be further characterized with sexual assault. Thanks. There was just a rape scene that literally added nothing and felt like more padding. And it's like, if you got to pad your work with a sexual assault, what are you doing? What are you doing? It's
to make Bridie look messed up in the last few chapters.
And also more tough because she fought her attacker. But we already knew she was tough. We were already described at length, in depth, all of the trials and tribulations she had been through. I did not need a man to come into her home and assault her. He was initially there to rob her, but then he's an asshole, so he decides, I'm gonna get me a rape in too. And you're just like, what the fuck? Why? There was no reason for this. Again, this is another character that you end up spending too much time with and gets too much description. Also, he can just be a fucking sexual assault gremlin for 10 pages and then disappear.
I thought we were almost out of this book without that, because this happens really beginning of the last quarter of the book, you could say. And I thought, okay, cool, we're not going to have any of that in here. And then just the gremlin pops up again. I'm still here. I've always been here.
Yeah, turns out we don't have the right pesticide for those yet. Working on it. So please don't do that. Please, again, we have talked about this before on the show. Of course, if you are, for example, writing a work about the experience of going through that, of course it's going to have to be included if that is the point. If you are writing from an important perspective around that, of course. If it is handled with grace, of course. Mercifully, we do not get detail. It is just alluded to. And honestly, we're not even sure if it was actually accomplished or if Bridie fought him off before he was able to commit said assault. But in any case, he attacks her, yada yada. But there was just no reason for it. If it had been cut out of this, it would have been more enjoyable. Again, if you cut this out and Ruby, this book would have been 20% more enjoyable, and I already found it 60% enjoyable. So this could have brought this up to an 80% for me.
I know.
Really could have made a huge difference here. So anyway, don't do it. Just don't do it. I thought that making her personal background so intrinsically connected to this case, to the extent that it was way too contrived. Because it's oh, she's working on this really hard case, and it turns out it's just her old nemesis, her sort of stepbrother from when she was with dad number 2, and he's a real asshole, and he murdered her dog, and now he's also the villain in this story, and it's why? There was no need for that. It didn't add anything.
It's supposed to add dramatic weight to it, because it's it's her stepbrother from back then, therefore it's her old nemesis. That's why she's so torn up about having to see him and stuff like that. So it adds that, but that's also just an unnecessary part of the story. I think there's a way to bring that in earlier so you know the story. Like, I think you could have maybe sold that to me better if you brought the mention of Gideon or like this being part of some of her past early on. Like, she gets called to the baronet's estate, and it's like the old estate that she used to live in, or you even condense the baronet down to like the son of the doctor, right? So it's like she doesn't want to be called back here, but it's got good pay or something like that to at least make it sort of relevant to like.
It just seemed there were so many parts to this, and almost all of them go back to her childhood, which just felt too contrived. It felt too fucking contrived. What are the chances that in the bustling metropolitan city of London, like the height of its prominence in the world, what are the chances that you are going to be hired by someone who is being defrauded by people you lived with as a child in succession? Like, not just one person, but like two of them involved.
Like you were passed around to multiple households, and like in all of these somehow they're wrapped up in this game.
Yeah, it's just a little too much. I don't think that the weight that it added was worth the twists and turns.
I will agree there.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to get at. So it was, I don't know, and Gideon is just like too easy of a villain.
He's a doctor, but he's really into basically cutting people up to see what's going on inside there. So he's not the kind of doctor that's in it to like learn. He actually just enjoys cutting people up
while they're alive and not anesthetized, I should say.
Yes.
Vivisection we're talking about.
Yes.
Sorry. And he's been this way since a child. He was just born evil and is evil. Like, there's no nuance. It's not. That's another reason why he was a bad villain. And I thought that including him as like the end boss was fucking dumb. Hated it. Absolutely hated it. Bad choice.
While we're on that, in terms of the little things here, it's very early in the book that it's revealed that Mrs. Bibby / Dorcas, even though you don't know she's Dorcas, I mean, you could put it together by like story number 2 or 3.
You do eventually put it together, yeah.
But her and Dr. Harbin are the ones that stole Christabel from the baronet at the start. And this is revealed like 3rd chapter.
Like immediately.
Like immediately. So I feel like the entire mystery that I could have been hooked in is like, you could have even had the chapters with Mrs. Bibby and Christabel, and it would just be Christabel is with this weird lady. I guess that's someone who kidnapped her. Where's this lady from? How is she related to the case? And you could have like dropped crumbs about like, oh, there's a maid that like went in there sometimes, or like. But it's just right away, the doctor that was in like the scene right before it is in the next scene being like, shit, we stole her. What are we going to do now?
Yeah, and then
you're not going to like lead me on a little bit?
And then like one of Bridie's early on in the book, one of her first memories is like, oh yeah, there was a shitty maid called Bad Dorcas and she had a hell of a limp. And then it's like cut to 2 chapters later. Man, that Mrs. Bibby sure has a hell of a limp with a shitty leg, and she's telling stories about a Dorcas, son. It's like, okay, yeah, we get it.
Right away.
Yeah.
The most premature case salt, like giving it to the reader that I've ever seen.
Yeah.
There's pills for that now, I think, that they keep advertising them to me on Facebook for some reason.
Are you an author that just doesn't know when to reveal the mystery in your story? Call now for Chris Amabibib.
There's some like weird ad with some guy in a bucket hat going like, I talked to my doctor about Chris Mebabib. You should talk to him too. Like, I'm supposed to go into the doctor's office and just be like, have you heard about what's Chris Mebabib? And the this is what they expect you to do is like, I heard a weird word on TV. What's that about, doc? And the doc will reveal to you what it's supposed. Tangent here on an already over-long episode. What the fuck is up with prescription medication commercials where I don't even get to know what it's for?
I mean, it does. They do tell you what it's for.
No. I've seen. What? Okay, the particular one I know this. It's Rebelsis. Rebelsis features a man walking onto the YouTube
from his childhood.
There's a man who looks like he is like in a terrible like Louisiana style like second line band or something. He's got a bucket hat and like a denim jacket on. He's got glasses and a little bit of beard. And he's like, I was down to talk with my doctor about Rebelsis. And he gives you like a little wink. And then he walks off. And I have no idea what the fuck I'm supposed to ask my doctor about.
Wait,
besides
really?
Rebelsis. Yes.
There was no voiceover being like, Rebelsis is for people with Crab's disease.
It's this fucking jazz douche out here going, I was down to talk with my doctor about Rebelsis. See you later. And I'm like, What is?
What a perfect encapsulation of like the medical industrial complex in America.
They expect me to walk into my doctor's office and have like the list of things I've seen commercials for lately. Like, okay, what about Rybelsus? What about semaglutide? What about, which is, by the way, a Rybelsus injection, turns out, which is a separate ad that I saw for, and I saw that it was also Rybelsus, but it was an injection.
Why are you being targeted for Rybelsus?
I don't know what it is.
Holy shit. Oh, man.
Okay, back to the book.
If you know what Rybelsus is, please give Terrible Book Club a call, or an email, or a Twitter message. Don't call us.
That unnecessary
actually,
shit
please.
is, like, again, what a lot of this book felt like to me. All right, back to all other small stuff. I'm sorry. I had to get that out of me. It's been sitting with me for months.
Chris's end boss, Rybelsus. Okay, sorry. Back to our regularly scheduled complaints here. We were talking about the fact that the kind of overall relationship structure of this book felt kind of contrived. It was like a little too much like, we're going to make everything reconnect back to Bridie's child. And it's like, yeah, I don't really need to do that. Would have been an effective story. I actually think it would have been more effective without that. And another of those things, there were a few, but one of the ones that stuck out to me as like, where I was like mad was in the middle of the book, maybe the hind middle of the book. Bridie is doing some investigating and interviewing, and she interviews this woman who runs like a lodging, and she's like, hey, do you have she's trying to figure out where Dorcas is holing up with Christabel Chevelle, and she's interrogating this woman, and the woman's being kind of shitty. She's really putting the irons to her, and finally she gives up a little bit and is like, fine, you can go look at the room where she's staying. She doesn't really admit it, but like kind of. So Bridie goes up to the room and she's looking around. She's like, some like half-eaten shitty food, and there's this, and like there just happens to be a key just out, and she's like, I'll take it. I'm like, okay, fine. That key ends up being a key to the garden door at the Eames's estate, and it is relevant because it is how Bridie, at the very end of the book, is able to escape with Myrtle and Christabel. And because she has that key and it's in her pocket, she thinks to try it, and that's how she gets away, and how she's able to make enough headway to get to the river and escape. And I just almost lost my fucking mind. Because why? Why would
that's some
Dorcas
Sierra adventure game logic, like old PC game,
like Myst,
the key that was in the one room. Like if you didn't pick it up 30 minutes ago, you're never gonna complete the game because you didn't do the thing.
Right. So presumably, if she hadn't pocketed that key and then also remembered to try that key in a moment of life, in a life or death situation, she would not have been able to escape. She probably would have been like captured or overtaken or whatever. I don't love it. I don't love the Myst key. That's what I'm going to call it. Another thing that really bugged me were the almost obligatory like villain confessions at the end. We get 2 of those, and unclear as to why. Just villain confessions.
Dorcas is just in Mrs. Baby / Dorcas is just in a chair at the end where, Bridie confronts her and she's like, why'd you do it? And she's like, well, I'm going to die soon anyway because of my bad leg. Here's why I did it.
And Bridie's like, I got to amputate your leg and you'd live. And she was like, nah. But then it's unclear. But then, like, she disappears. So presumably she did not just keel over and die. So it wasn't a deathbed confession. So what the fuck? And she's just like, yeah, here's the whole explanation, just in case you weren't paying attention. Here you go. That's why I did it. And
a little convenient for me as someone that was kind of confused about some things towards the end. It did clear up some things, but that's just a very boneheaded way to do it in a book.
It's a crappy vehicle that we've had to drive many times. I hate it. Doesn't work. And then we also get a second complimentary villain confession from Sir Berwick. Or no,
yes,
Sir Berwick, who, okay, I don't remember I don't actually remember why he got arrested. I'm like blanking on that right now.
I think they were suspicious that he was the one that stole the kid anyway. Like he was like, oh, it was Dr. Harbin's beheading, I think.
Right. Sorry. Excuse me. So Dr. Harbin, who again was Berwick's doctor, who was actually the one like Harbin who conspired and like hired Dorcas and they stole the kid or whatever. Harbin gets double-crossed at the end by Gideon Eames, who, you know, is evil for evil's sake, so he decides to decapitate Hardin because I think he just felt like Hardin was a loose end who was too wily and was worried that he was going to, like, say something, so he just kills him. He sends the head to Bridie in a box. We've all seen Seven. It kind of loses. Yeah. Kind of loses
whatever,
effect after that.
Head to box. Ugh, yeah. Old news.
Yeah, it was, that was stupid. I didn't, like, that was also fucking dumb.
Why did he, what was the point of killing Dr. Harbin?
Oh, well, I meant sending the head to Bridie was dumb. Killing Dr. Harbin was, again, just because he was, like, a loose end, and he was kind of, remember, he was being kind of, like, fiddly. He was like, I don't know, and they were like, all right,
sure.
Fine.
But why send it to Bridie except just to be weird and gross for being weird and gross sake, which doesn't really add much?
Also because she is experienced with corpses and is a medical professional.
So yeah, it wouldn't, like, gross her out that much.
Nope, it wouldn't. Sure didn't. In any case.
Berwick's in jail.
Berwick's in jail. Sorry, I don't quite remember. I think he might be in jail because I think he beheaded Harbin. I don't remember. Point being, he's in jail. He's a baronet. He's like a minor noble, and oftentimes the minor nobles are the worst because they think they're so above everyone. And he's so freaked out by being in jail that he's like almost catatonic. He's pissing and shitting himself, which is kind of bizarre, honestly, because he's also alone in his own cell. It's not like he's like with the general population. So it didn't really make sense that he would be literally pissing and shitting himself in fear and catatonic, but here we are.
Anyway, there's like these two comic relief guards. They get like a little they get a little Abbott and Costello like,
for no
at
reason.
Each other for a little bit. And then later on, because Bridie went to visit the baronet.
Yeah, she tried to talk to him and he was too fucked up and couldn't talk.
Then like a page after Bridie leaves, they're like, well, you got the hammer, haven't you? Okay, we'll be taking him teeth right then. Go. And they like knock his gold teeth out and they let him out of jail.
Yeah, it seems like he allows them to take, he bargains with them. They rip out 5 of his gold teeth and he gives them a pocket watch and they're like, all right, I guess you can go. Which, pretty weird. I mean, to be fair, I didn't do any research around this, but it did seem a pretty odd point. And you would think like, okay, he really wants to get out of jail. Great, he does. But then he just goes to Bridie and just confesses. And I don't know if that would be my first inclination if I escaped jail. I don't know if I would go...
like, his confession, too, was like, yes, I've kept Christabel, and like...
I stole her from her family.
Which was, I guess, was kind of obvious. By the way, I don't think I even mentioned the part... You know what? We'll get to that in the motivations.
Yeah. So he's like, oh, yeah, I stole her from her family. This is all my fault. This was dumb. And, you know, Bridie's like, yeah, I already figured this out. Like,
you didn't have to lose your teeth, dude. Like,
So I don't understand why that whole part was even included. It didn't feel useful. I don't think
he just runs in during the climactic moment and is like, I must tell you right now.
Yeah, I don't remember if he said anything that she actually hadn't figured out. I don't quite remember.
I don't think so.
Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't remember it being anything that was like, maybe he just confirmed some of her suspicions, but that didn't feel very necessary at that point in the book. No. We're like almost at the apex of the story. So I don't know. It was strange.
Agreed.
Yeah. Before we get to why anyone do things.
Yes.
All right. So at the very, very end, when they have their final end boss fight, in Victorian
Vivisector Gideon Eames,
yeah,
Dark Souls. Like,
yeah.
Pretty good one, actually.
Yeah. I mean, I do.
One of my Mickey Mouse choir or whatever I was doing over here.
Please cut all that together. Holy shit. Okay. When Bridie goes back to the Eames' estate, because of course Gideon is posted up there, now that his dad's gone, to confront, Gideon, the final boss, and get the children back because, he's also kidnapped Myrtle Harbin.
Just for bonus kidnap, just for the extra bonus.
Because evil guy does evil stuff, like kidnap children again for a second time because evil guy. So he kidnaps Myrtle, and obviously he's also got Christabel at this point. She rolls in and she walks into the laboratory where she used to work with John Eames when she was his ward, like learning about surgical stuff. And it's been totally transformed. It's been gutted and rebuilt, and it has got a bunch of like vivisection stuff and surgical stuff. It's basically like he made it an evil laboratory. And Gideon is standing there, and in the middle there is an enormous, I believe, octagonal tank. Was it octagonal? It doesn't matter.
It's not.
Huge tank. And it's clear that this is where he's keeping Christabel. And he's standing at the top of like the ladder to enter the tank, and he has Myrtle, and he's about to like push Myrtle in, and Bridie has her pistol, and did she shoot Kemp or Gideon? She tries to shoot one of them, misses and hits the tank.
Yes.
Unless she was intending to hit the tank. I don't quite remember.
I think it was intended to hit the tank so that he couldn't
sorry.
do any, like, regardless if she got out alive or dead.
Right. So she shoots the tank because it's a huge tank, and obviously if like a bunch of glass and water get everywhere, then she can escape. And my question is like, okay, if you are a super rich, evil, mad scientist doctor, and you're like, I am building an enclosure for my monster, it not be able to withstand a little pistol bullet?
Never thought anyone would get in there with a gun.
I guess, but like...
Oh, so you want to get close to it and stare at it, like, dramatically, like, put your hand up to the glass, you do the evil person who with the captured sea creature thing, like, put your face up against it.
And I know this was slightly too early for bulletproof glass, that didn't come for, like, several more decades, but I was just a little taken by the whole, like, no contingency plan if there's a crack in the glass. Kind of weird. But I guess, you know what? Maybe I take this back, because I think he was planning on cutting Christabel up alive. So I guess this big elaborate tank was
a short-term investment?
Okay. I guess that makes it even dumber, actually. I don't know. Real weird.
I just want you to temporarily put a tank in here, and then you're going to take it out later. Also, if you don't, I'll vivisect you. So.
Yeah, I guess. So his plan was he was going to invite a bunch of people into the laboratory, and it had a bunch of chairs and stuff, so he was going to be like, look at her, and he was going to drag her out and cut her up for them.
So you know what? Here we go, Paris. Why anyone do anything?
Yeah, why?
Why? Okay, let's just start with why decapitate Harbin? And
I think I already explained that.
And send it to Bridie is really what I was going to add.
I mean, because I guess you're supposed to think like, oh, he's still that little asshole boy inside because he's just evil, and evil people do things like that. And it's like, yeah, but what a lame fucking character. There's no nuance. It's just obvious. You just hate Gideon. He murdered a dog. They make you think that he actually killed his sister, but it turns out it was Dorcas anyway. But, they also make you think that he beat up his dad's girlfriend to the point of totally changing her personality, but again, it was actually Dorcas, and she sort of framed him for it. I mean, but he did cut a dog up alive and then send it to Bridie. But I guess he was like a callback. It was like, oh, here's Dr.
I'm still
Hartman's
cutting him
head.
up.
Yeah,
Still cutting over here.
But again, completely unnecessary. Did not add anything to the story. Didn't add a damn thing.
How about why Dorcas is... I know Dorcas wants to just get a payday.
Well, she also wants revenge for her friend, but I don't quite understand the mechanism for the revenge.
So she takes Christabel... First, she's looking for a buyer at all? Right?
You know what? I gotta say, I'm trying to remember the exact timeline here. Because
at first, her and Dr. Harbin are all nervous about who's gonna buy her.
You're right. But I don't know if that was Dorcas intentionally being dissembling and tricking Harbin because she already had a buyer.
Yes.
Okay.
At a certain point, though, she decides she wants to sell Christabel to Lufkin the circus man before she sells her to Gideon.
I don't remember.
Why? So if there's this like whole revenge plot with Gideon to like, I don't know, frame him in this way, or like, because Gideon kills Della Webb, Dorcas's ex, I suppose, and she wants to, this is after the Eliza. When did the Eliza thing happen in relation to Della Webb?
Eliza getting beat up was earlier because Edgar Kemp was still a baby or toddler, I suppose. And oh no, maybe
what I mean.
Maybe you're right.
This is what I mean.
Maybe that happens
so
before.
It's very confusing as to what is happening.
You're right. You're right. Yeah, this much must happen before. Okay, so what I recall from the text is that Dorcas and Gideon initially had an alliance because Dorcas wanted to steal some jewelry from Mrs. Eames, and Gideon hated his sister. So Dorcas was like, alright, I'm gonna kill your sister if you give me those gems. They make the deal. She pushes the kid out the window, and then Gideon relinquishes his side of the deal. Doesn't give her the gems. Then I'm pretty sure Dorcas like beats his ass.
Yeah.
He's also a kid at this point.
Yes.
He's evil, but he's also a kid.
Yes.
She's a full-grown adult. So I think she like beats his ass, and they like come to some kind of agreement. And then I don't remember. I think the my God, what was her name? It was Dr. Eames was having an affair with, what's her name?
The lady that was found dead.
Oh no.
I don't remember this.
Oh my God,
nameless
we
character.
We were just saying her name, and I forgot.
Eliza.
John Eames, Dr. John Eames the senior, is having an affair with Eliza the housemaid. That affair produces Edgar Kempton, who is Edgar/Kemp. And she's sticking around for a while. It seems like she got pregnant again, and Gideon and her have a secret conversation in the barn that Bridie comes upon accidentally. And he's like, but I can help you get rid of it. And she's like, no, I really, like, I don't fucking trust you, man. Like, no thanks. And she leaves, and Gideon is, like, pissed. And I don't know, or maybe Gideon was also having an affair with her. It was kind of confusing. That point, to me, was confusing. It's very clear that he's offering her an abortion, but then I'm also not sure if, like, they were an item. I don't think so. I think it was his dad.
Yes.
And so...
the impression that I got.
Yeah. And so he is mad and a huge baby because she doesn't want him to help her. And so then Dorcas beats the shit out of her to the point that it like changes her personality. She like can barely function. And Dorcas pins that on Gideon because she knows that child Bridie is like convinced that Gideon did it and is looking for evidence. So Dorcas plants evidence, and she knows Bridie is going to bring it to the dad and like get him kicked out. So she does. That all happens. Gideon gets sent away. You know, Dorcas is stoked because her plan worked because Gideon gets sent away, and Gideon thinks Bridie's the reason, and she kind of is, but like she was going off of faked planted evidence. She doesn't know that because Dorcas was really good about
this
all
has been
this.
going for like 5 minutes here. This is the answer to the question to why did Dorcas do any of this?
Okay, and then as a consequence of this, I want you all to know that I am doing this from my fresh brain, and I have not been looking at notes.
Yes, this is magnificent, honestly. But I still think at the end, let me cut you off.
No,
okay,
don't cut me off yet, because I'm going to lose it. Okay.
Fine.
And then, so
so
Gideon gets sent away, but also Bridie gets sent away. I don't know. This is just what rich people in the UK do. Something happens
to a
kid,
child.
Just go, leave. So he decides, well, he can't keep anyone. All the children must go. And so he tells Bridie, like, look, dude, I'm gonna give you a little, not not a trust fund,
annuity.
But like annuity, yes. I'm going to give you a little nest egg so you can live a respectable life. You never have to work. And I'm going to recommend you, I'm going to give you a letter of recommendation to this guy who's like a toxicologist chemist, which is Prudo. And then so she goes to Prudo. Prudo teaches her about, like toxicology and chemicals and drugs. So that's like a perfect complement to her surgical experience. And then her previous, dead people experience. So like she's got all the tools. And so she gets sent away, but like kind of works out because she gets enough money to live on for the rest of her life.
Why is relevant to why Dorcas did any of this?
Pausing. We skipped the part where Gideon recruited Bridie to help him operate on Della.
Yes.
Fuck, I thought I had all this.
See, you went off on a like because that's what the book does. No, that's what this book is like. I think this is actually perfect because you're trying to connect the dots, right? And
which I usually like, but this was the dots were sometimes stars
in another universe.
Sometimes triangles.
There's not even a ballpark here.
Yeah.
It's just completely the games are different in a way. So this is exactly what I'm talking about, is me asking you a simple question of why did Dorcas do this?
Okay, right. And I was trying to explain her interwoven relationship with Bridie and Gideon. I did forget that before Gideon gets, mixed up, before all the Eliza stuff, Gideon just one day is like, forces Bridie to help him, and she's like, I don't want to fucking help you. And he's like, well, you either do it or I get you in a lot of trouble and get you sent away. And she's like, fine. So he's like, hey, this lady who lives kind of near here in a cottage, she has this like horrible giant tumor that like, it almost looks like she's pregnant. That's how bad it is. And she's in excruciating pain. She's probably going to die. And Bridie's like, well, we could just take her to the hospital. Because Bridie, even though she's young, she's done a lot of study on this stuff. And he's like, no, I'm going to do it. I'm better than the hospital. And so he operates on her, kills her, obviously. And then Bridie is sworn to secrecy and has to hold this horrible secret that she assisted in this woman's death and that Gideon intentionally operated on this woman just to murder her and look at her insides. Really fucked up shit, right, to deal with. And turns out that's Della Webb, Dorcas's girlfriend. Pretty sure romantic girlfriend, kind of unclear, but it does call her like love, so I'm pretty sure that's what it is. So Dorcas at some point finds out about this, which is why I think she goes through the whole framing thing, gets him sent away. Gideon is assumed dead a couple of years later because he was supposedly on a ship that like foundered in Australia, and someone claimed they saw his dead body, and so it was like for many years like he's dead. Turns out he's not dead. Comes back and he studies to be a surgeon like his dad. And I guess at some point everyone finds out about it. Bridie finds out about it in the text. We must assume Dorcas found out before that. And then I'm foggy on what's going on after that.
Again, Paris, I'm going to cut you off here because I simply asked you, why did Dorcas do this?
Yeah, instead of answering, I just retold you.
So that is my point. That is my entire point with this. It's such a convoluted, interwoven thing. And at the end, I'm still like, but why?
Yeah, because I was like, oh, it was to get back at Gideon. But then I was like, but what is...
But is it?
But how?
Because... And she already did before. Yeah. So why... is it just like a con thing where she wants to make money and in the end she's like, fuck it, I don't care. But like it's also interwoven with her previous personal life because Gideon's showing up and he also wants a bit of that marrow money or whatever. Like, I don't understand why anyone did anything here. Yeah. Why did Dr. Harbin, who is like employed at like an estate?
Yeah, he's like a real doctor. He's like a legitimate doctor.
Why does he need the extra cash? Like he's not even in debt. He's just like, I guess we'll sell this marrow.
And it's weird because you would think that a doctor's motivation here would be to be credited with a discovery, but if he has to.
He's just like, we gotta fucking sell it to the circus. I don't care. So what? Like this is like a medical thing that you could like make your name on or something, and you're just like, I'm so nervous. We gotta sell it. So why?
How could it be enough money to make all of this worth it?
So why? Why any of this?
I don't know, which is why I was like, did we miss something? But when you were also confused about this, and then I thought I had it together, and then I reread parts, and I was like, wait, that's not it.
And you just went into a fugue state in front of me, trying to describe the details of why Dorcas did any of this, and you landed nowhere near the motivation.
My only guess is that she was hoping that she was going to die before she could be, because her leg is clearly gangrenous and like actually going to kill her at, relatively soon. I think she was hoping she would die. Therefore, it doesn't matter if she was implicated, but Gideon would ultimately be blamed for everything because he's the one who ended up with the child. That's the only little scrap
I guess I'll take it. An extremely long, convoluted plot to get back at Gideon when Dorcas is perfectly willing to just murder fools. So what's the problem with just murdering Gideon?
Yeah, she's always killing people.
So what's the problem?
She also killed the child's actual mother.
What's the problem?
For, no real reason.
Just shoot him. Right?
Yeah.
It seems like you're the type of person that would just shoot him.
Yeah. And I mean, if
starring
you're gonna...
David Spade.
If you're just gonna die anyway and you don't care, just walk up to the motherfucker and pop him. Like, be done with it.
Okay, cool. That's what I wanted out of this point. There's many other things like this
you're right.
in the
story. The fact that it took us 20 minutes to get there is too much.
Okay.
And then the motivations for
why? We're stopping this here, Ferris.
No, but you're right. Harbin's motivation, baffling. Berwick wanting to keep the child. I mean, he was like really into ocean stuff, but like
so this is the thing that I mentioned before. He brings in Bridie to do the investigation, find out who stole my daughter. No, I'm not telling you anything about my daughter. No, you may not go into any of the rooms that she once resided in. Mm-hmm. What is your plan to have Bridie solve anything for you if she's just like, find my daughter? Can you tell me anything about her? No. Fucking find her.
Yeah, I think my explanation for this is that, again, you have, the sniveling lower nobility who are more concerned about appearances.
Why do you even fucking call Bridie?
I don't know.
That's my point.
No.
Moving on. Can we fix it?
I was thinking, and Bridie also thinks this herself in the text, that perhaps she was called because it was supposed to be a fool's errand, because her previous case, she actually hadn't found a missing child in time and he was murdered. And so she thinks that, well, because her last case went bad and her child died, maybe they think she's just shitty and she's not going to find the kid and they're going to get away with it. And like, she's only hired because even though Berwick wants to get her back, he kind of just wants this air of like, oh, I'm trying to find my child, and like someone's looking into it. Meanwhile, he really...
But there's no air because no one knows about there's no reputation.
You're right. I don't fucking know. I don't know. I'm not sure.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
Paris, can we fix it?
Yes.
I think yes. Also, yes.
Yes.
You cut less Ruby.
No Ruby.
Don't
you fucking dare. I don't want a smidge
of Ruby.
I don't want anyone named Ruby
Get your
or
boots
Ronan
out of this book.
I don't want any boxing boots. I don't want any tattoos. I don't want boxing mentioned. Just all of it's gone. No ghost lover. No ghost boxer, no ghost lover.
Less revealing the kidnapper early and like Dr. Harbin moving from like he's just in a scene once and then immediately reveal him as implicated in the plot. Less of that. Give me a little bit more obscurity on that one. Just generally a less convoluted plot. Let's just like merge some of the dads together. Get like Gideon and like a Dr. Harbin, maybe you could even merge together in a way.
I don't know why Edgar Kemp has to be his like henchman.
Sure.
I think to make the plot less convoluted, you don't have to loop everything back to her childhood. It's really bizarre. You don't need to do that. It's unnecessary. It's weird.
So in conclusion, less
in general. Also, less on that point. Just scroll back a little bit on those descriptions. Like we just carve back just a little bit. We don't need to know the detail of every shopkeeper and street urchin and sweeper and hat maker. And we don't need to know the details of every smell you encounter around every corner. There is some great scene setting and great description here, but it just runs away. It runs away with the story a few times. You just go rein it in, man. Just a little bit less. Cut a little bit out.
Do that, and I would have recommended this wholeheartedly.
Yeah, totally.
Honestly, if you want Lady Sherlock, Sherlock
Holmes. Sherlock Holmes, forensic private investigator.
It would have been. I would have recommended this if you really just like that kind of thing. Sure, read it. Great. All right.
Yeah, it did a lot well. I think I was real like 60-40 on this, and then I don't know. Maybe now I'm 40-60. I'm not really sure.
Yeah. It's too convoluted plot. The boxer lover ghost was not.
It's terrible.
Not necessary.
No assault either. Get rid of sexual assault.
Once again, less.
Just less of things. Fewer things in fewer jars.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Let me close it with this. This title for this book is actually perfect because I do really feel like I'm just paraded through a menagerie of random fun things that kind of on their own
related.
are a little. You got Cora Butters, the tall housemaid. You got a Marrow. You've got like Victorian London lady investigator. You've got the
very evil stepbrother.
Yeah, like all these little tiny bits that are interesting of their own, but it just feels like an unrelated exhibition of things in jars.
Wow.
I'm gonna go jump off the bridge.
I know, get over to Britain. I'm gonna burn you all together.
Okay, good. Anyway, thank you, Donnie, for recommending this one to us. This was actually a good one.
This is a great recommendation.
The length of this episode.
There was a lot to talk about. There were a lot of things we liked about it, but we were still torn and had interesting reasons, I think, to dissect this with some anesthesia. But yeah,
I think your book club made the right decision, though.
Yeah,
because everyone was like, there's like a spell cast on this story where it's just like there's a fogginess to everything. You can't quite get it's like one of those spells that makes people like realize they have something else to do instead of like finding your magical wizard tower. There's like the protection spell on it that makes people like, oh shit, I left the oven on. Like, or whatever.
Don't forget about the oven.
That's right.
Or you'll burn the whole house down.
That's a completely different melody than the one that I used, but okay.
Sorry.
Anyway, let's thank the patrons. Thank you, Greg, Veronica, Will, D, Jared, Arant, Senia, Jakub, Lycoris, Elliot, Kieran, Martin, Luchek, Miri, Yanka, David, Anya, Patricia, Austin, Donnie, especially Donnie, Crimson Paladin, Beast with the Least, Scott H, Robin, Laxdotes of the Void, the Taco-Eating Unicorn, Last Man on Earth 01, Funny Robot with Antennas, Hobby Boy 93, Harry, Renee, Emmy, Joyuse the Ugly One, Bleach Black Cat, and Julius the Nice Dragon, and our Ko-fi donor Kiwi thing. That's all of them. That's all of them. There's a nice dragon there now, too.
Yeah, I know. It's pretty fun to have a nice dragon. Hope he has a nice recommendation for us.
Well, Paris, I'm off to figure out what my motivations for even doing any of this are, but it's a long, convoluted explanation that will drop later on in an episode. It'll be 30 minutes long.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you all, and thank you, Chris, and we will see you next time. Goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Terrible Book Club. Terrible Book Club is an independent podcast produced by your hosts, Paris and Chris. Sound design and audio editing by Chris, with sound effects and music by Epidemic Sound and sometimes also Chris. Our theme song is Kiss by Yearn, which is, you guessed it, actually also Chris. You can find more of his soothing synthy sounds on Bandcamp at yearn.bandcamp.com. Do you want us to review a book of your choice on the show? Do you want access to some extra audio-visual weirdness? If so, become a patron at patreon.com/terriblebookclub. If you'd like to send us a one-time tip instead, you can do that at ko-fi.com/terriblebookclub. You can also support TBC for free by sharing the show on social media, following our accounts on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, or Goodreads, telling your friends about your favorite episode, or by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts, Podchaser, or anywhere else on the internet. To send us book recommendations or your adorable pet photos, send an email to terriblebookclub@gmail.com.